In Psalm 81, the voice of Jesus speaks through Asaph as a prophet. Asaph calls his people to sing for joy, somewhat in response to the previous Psalms in which the people have been calling out to God for rescue, for salvation. And particularly at the end of Psalm 80, as you can see, Asaph speaks in behalf of the people, asking God to restore them. And so at this point, it's true that we can look at more of a positive angle because Asaph is calling the people here now to respond to what he has done, not only to sing, but to shout aloud. And then he also calls them to play their instruments. One of the main themes that comes through this psalm is the notion, the importance that the people need to hear and listen. Not only does Asaph say that he heard an unknown voice, that is, he could not distinguish it, yet he knew it was the voice of God himself speaking to his people. And Psalm 81 is somewhat of a history lesson, just like Psalms 77, 78, 79, and 80, as the people are either experiencing these thoughts and these reflections while they are in exile, or looking back at that time and realizing they need not only to hear, but to listen. You can see once again that this voice, the voice of God, is telling the people to hear, but to go beyond that, because the real issue is not simply that they would not hear, but that they would not listen. I'm reminded that there is a difference between hearing and listening. In hearing, we might go through the processes, we might act mechanically, but in listening, we not only hear the words, but we process them, consider them, ponder them, meditate on them. And you can even see a further qualification here expressed in verse 13, that listening involves, at least according to Asaph's reflection here, not just hearing and not even simply understanding, but going beyond that and following, that is obeying. So the psalm is a warning. It's a warning through Jesus Christ himself, for Jesus Christ came to deliver a gospel of hope to those who had no hope. And he called them not just simply to hear, but to listen. In Mark chapter 9, the situation of the transfiguration in which three disciples were with Jesus as they appeared with him, and great prophets of old also appeared with Jesus, and God's voice said, "This is my son whom I love. Listen to him." This voice speaks through Psalm 81. We are warned in Romans 1, chapter 1, verses 24 and 26. You can see over here on the right-hand side, though I forgot to list the book itself. But the danger of not listening, the danger of not following, this psalm points to, and that is God will, if there's a constant stubbornness not to listen, not to obey, not to follow, God will, he has and will give those over to their own sinfulness to the point that they pay the consequences, and there is no remedy. So it might seem like this is bad news, but it's not, because look at the good news. You can see the good news as it is shared in many different statements on the final stanza of this psalm, foreshadowing the gospel. If Israel, if God's people would only listen, if they would only follow, this is good news. Jesus brings this good news through the gospel, and God's promises still ring true.